curse of the Blood Elves. Much had changed in the Eastern Kingdom since Lordaeron's fall. The Scourge continued roaming the land, hunting down survivors and clashing with Alliance resistance forces. Yet, Lordaeron was not the only nation struggling to cope with the aftermath of defeat. The High Elves of Quel'Thalas had suffered just as many losses as their neighbors to the south. Not only had the Death Knight Arthas Menethil left the once beautiful lands a blight and graveyard, but he had also tainted Sunwell, the fount of arcane magic that was the beating heart of High Elven society. Grieving for the decimation of their homeland, the High Elves decided to call themselves Blood Elves in honor of their fallen people. Arthas had also killed Quel'Thalas' king and Astarion Sunstrider. By right of succession, rule over the elves fell to the sorceress prince Quel'Tha Sunstrider, but at first he was nowhere to be found. The heir to the throne had been in Dalaran during the homeland's downfall. When he received word of the attack, he rushed to Quel'Thalas. By then, the battle had already been lost. The surviving elves greeted Quel'Thas with thinly veiled resentment. Rather than fighting to protect Quel'Thalas, he had been in Dalaran. To many elves, it seemed that Quel'Thas enjoyed spending his time in that distant city more than in his own homeland. Quel'Thas made no excuses for being absent in Quel'Thalas' hour of need. His people had every right to be bitter. He resolved to prove himself to the elves and do whatever he could to rebuild their kingdom. It was not easy for him. In truth, Quel'Thas had always felt distant from his people. They were largely insular and isolationist, but he had been quite the opposite. He wanted to see the world, to interact with different races and learn new ideas. He surveyed Silvermoon City's ruins and attended his father's funeral, but he struggled to connect with the elves. Nonetheless, Quel'Thas continued trying. He did love his people and his kingdom, more than some elves might have known. And this love was what drew him into the tainted Sunwell. Quel'Thas was horrified at the sight of the Sunwell and the twisted energy swirling through its depth. Through his attunement to magic, he sensed that the fount's dark power was gradually enveloping Quel'Thalas. In time, it would seep into the hearts and minds of the Blood Elves and kill them all. There was no means to cleanse the Sunwell with any certainty. Quel'Thalas' other senior Blood Elves had come to the same conclusion. Along with Quel'Thas, they decided there was only one way to stop the spread of the Sunwell's toxic energies. Quel'Thas gathered the most powerful magi in Quel'Thalas at the fount. In unison, they conducted a great ritual that destroyed the Sunwell. A burst of energy cascaded out from the fount, obliterating the remaining scourge in the area. The loss of the fount was immediately felt by the Blood Elves. They had lived their entire lives bathed in the Sunwell's energies, so much so that they had become addicted to arcane magic. Now, cut off from the fount, they began suffering from withdrawal. The pangs of addiction would only grow more deliberating as time passed, and many elves would fall ill and become lethargic. Though Quel'Thas was troubled by his new development, more immediate dangers consumed his attention. The Scourge were still in firm control of Lordaeron. As long as the undead roamed the nearby land, the Blood Elves would never know peace. If Quel'Thas and his people were to rebuild their kingdom, they needed to help the remnants of the Alliance defeat the Scourge. Quel'Thas' father had seceded from the Alliance, but that did not stop the prince from lending aid to the faction. He gathered his healthiest soldiers and journeyed into Lordaeron to join the fight against the undead. The prince appointed a seasoned ranger named Lortham Martheron to serve as the Regent Lord of Quel'Thalas and watch over the rest of the Blood Elves in his stead. Quel'Thas' departure did not surprise most Blood Elves. Once again, he was leaving behind his homeland and venturing to distant lands. Children of Blood and Stars. Though many pockets of Alliance resistance were scattered across Lordaeron, the largest group had gathered in Silverpine Forest. This force was led by a human, Grand Marshal Oathmar Garithos. As the highest-ranking survivor of Lordaeron's military, Garithos was leader of the army by chance, not because of merit. He was far from the ideal commander. Garithos was an ill-tempered and xenophobic man who scorned an unhuman races in his ranks. Prince Kel'Thas Sunstroid and his Blood Elves were not spared from this Grand Marshal's bigotry. When the prince pledged his loyalty to the Alliance resistance, Garithos accepted it purely out of necessity. He made no attempt to hide his disdain for the elves. Despite the chilly reception, Kel'Thas committed himself and his people to the war effort. The Blood Elves quickly proved themselves to be one of the most effective fighting forces in the Alliance army. They seized large swaths of land in the Silver Pine Forest and slowly worked their way toward the ruins of Dalaran. The broken city was still partially under the control of the Kirin Tor, but the surrounding land was swarming with undead. As Kel'Thas approached Dalaran, he made an unsettling discovery. The air crackled with unseen arcane energy, and the earth trembled beneath its feet. Somewhere near Dalaran, a storm of magic was brewing. Whatever the disturbance was, it threw the Scourge into a frenzy. Undead streamed into the region in greater numbers than ever before. The Blood Elves braced against the tide of undead, and each day was a struggle to hold their ground. Kel'Thas was in the midst of pulling his soldiers back from their front lines when he crossed paths with strangers from a distant land. After braving foul weather and rough seas, Maeve Shadowsong, Tyrande Whisperwind, Malfurion Stormrage, and the other Night Elves had reached Lordaeron's coast in pursuit of Illidan. Blood Elves and Night Elves shared a common ancestry, but their cultures were vastly different. However, Kel'Thas did not find this off-putting. There was so much he could learn from his distant cousins, perhaps even something to help ease his people's magical withdrawal. When Kel'Thas discovered that the Night Elves were hunting a powerful demon named Illidan, he theorized that the creature might be responsible for the anomaly in Dalaran. That would explain why the Scourge had suddenly become so frenzied. Kel'Thas agreed to aid the Night Elves in their hunt for Illidan Stormrage. After more than 10,000 years of separation, the divided elven societies were working together for a common good. Assault on the Lich King. The Night Elves were not the only hunting Illidan Stormrage. Through the eyes of the undead, the Lich King had seen Lady Vashj and her Naga skulking around Dalaran. Their intentions did not become clear until Illidan later appeared in the city's ruins and began his spell work. He drew on Dalaran's ley lines to amplify the Eye of Sargeras' destructive potential. A rising storm of arcane energy slowly coalesced around Illidan, growing more powerful by the day. The Lich King had always known that Kill Jaina would retaliate against him. It seemed the Demon Lord had found a new agent to do his bidding, and a mighty one at that. It was clear that Illidan would soon direct his immense spell at the Frozen Throne. Not for the first time, the Lich King was reminded of his true weakness. He was trapped in ice, which made the entity an easy target for the likes of Illidan. The Lich King's only resource was to unleash the Scourge on Dalaran and stop the spellwork. The undead flooded through southwestern Lordaeron, but they reached Illidan too late. He had finished his preparations. Illidan directed the tempest of arcane energy at the roof of the world, channeling its fury into Icecrown Glacier. Even Lady Vashj and her Naga were awed by the display of raw power. The influx of magic caused the land itself to buckle. Massive fissures erupted, not only near Dalaran, but in regions across the world. Illidan ignored these unintended effects, as well as the Scourge army closing in around him. While his followers held the undead at bay, he focused his mind on Icecrown. Wave after wave of magic pummeled the ice. The bombardment finally cracked the Lich King's prison, leaving the entity exposed. A few more strikes were all that Illidan needed to extinguish the Lord of the Scourge. But as he prepared his final barrage, chaos engulfed him. The combined Night Elf and Blood Elf armies crashed into Illidan's forces. The fighting soon reached Illidan himself, and the Night Elf threw his spellwork into disarray. The eye of Sargeras crumbled before him, the squawking earth stilled, the roaring storm of magic above Ice-Crown Glacier went silent. In an instant, Illidan's victory had turned into disaster. He was furious that the Night Elves had inadvertently saved the Lich King, but they felt no remorse for their actions. Illidan's spellwork had devastated the land, and it would have led to even more destruction if they hadn't stopped him. In Illidan's view, the Night Elves were being short-sighted. They didn't understand that they would need to be ready to sacrifice everything to destroy the demons and their creations. The elves didn't have the will to fight Illidan's war against the Legion, and Illidan did not believe they ever would.